Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here for our first Partnering for Cures out here on the West Coast. This morning, we got to hear Reg Kelly's amazing story and his call to action for how we can further and speed up cognitive disease research. We got to hear about some awesome initiatives around precision medicine, like All of Us and others up here on this stage. We talked about data science, and we had some conversations around how patients can help to define the value conversation. I just want to take one moment to thank the group that really makes that possible, our Partnering for Cures San Francisco sponsors. First, I'd like to thank our benefactor, the Helmsley Charitable Trust. I would like to thank our gold sponsors, Alkermes, Celgene, and Pfizer. Our silver sponsors, Astellas, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Deloitte, Genentech, GSK, Merck, and also Royalty Pharma. And then also our Milken Institute strategic partners who support the Milken Institute work throughout the entire year. So they further our programmatic work on top of the events that the broader Milken Institute hosts throughout the year around the country and the world. So coming up, we still have a lot of rich content ahead. Including this session that's up next on artificial intelligence and machine learning and its impact on medical R&D, whether that's a lot of hope or really just some hype. We will soon find out. I do want to highlight the agenda change that Kim mentioned this morning as well. Immediately following this afternoon's breakout sessions, be sure to head right on back here as Milken Institute Chairman will be joining leaders from UCSF and Stanford Medicine with having a conversation up here on this stage prior to our closing plenary focused on philanthropy. So without further ado, we are going to have a little preview maybe of that conversation from Milken Institute and Faster Cure's chairman, Mike Milken. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Well, one, thank you, and it's great to be here. And the discussion this afternoon will be with Lloyd Minard from Stanford and Chancellor Sam Hawgood from UCSF, and really focused on, as two of the leaders in the entire world in this area, are they equipped to deal with the medical science, bioscience of the 21st century? How are we training the people going through medical schools, etc.? And it was interesting, just as at our public health session, the Future of Public Health, Precision Public Health, a couple weeks ago in Washington, one of our participants runs the nutrition effort at Harvard, originally went to medical school in China, and pointed out when they went to medical school in China, you never studied diabetes, which is obviously a significant focus here today, and you never studied nutrition. Now, nutrition in our schools, many people never studied nutrition, but the fact that they never studied diabetes, as they're now projecting potentially over 100 million pre-diabetics and diabetics in China, has caused quite a challenge for the country. One of the quizzes, which I'm not giving you today, is what is the fastest growing job in America on a percentage basis? Answer, wind turbine technician. Wind turbine technician. So as you think about the changes that are going, okay, here is your question. Hopefully we will not give you the answer, Larry, when I ask the question. Okay. Hopefully you'll see if we're ready. What is America's best-selling cereal? Okay, we didn't tell you the answer yet. Okay, hello, Atul. Okay, these are your choices. 5. You have 20 seconds to talk it over, 1 vote per table. Okay, time's up. Time's up. Shh. 1 vote per table. How many think it's Honey Nut Cheerios? 1. Multiple votes at this table, multiple votes at that table. 1, okay. Any other table? Okay. 6 tables. Okay. Frosted Flakes. How many people had Frosted Flakes as a kid? Anyone have it as a kid? Okay, good. All right. Okay, 3 tables for Frosted. Rice Krispies. No votes for Rice Krispies. Fruit Loops. Are you voting for Fruit Loops? Okay. Do your other table mates agree with you there? We don't know. Okay. Or Quaker Oats oatmeal today with all the knowledge. 3 at my table. Okay. Any others? Okay, any other oatmeal votes here? Okay, we only had 3. Correct answer? All right, so when you buy these, of course, you're checking the ingredients. Number 1 ingredients, whole grain, sugars 2, oat bran 3, then cornstarch, honey, brown sugar, and sugar. Okay, those are your ingredients. 9 grams of sugar in the serving. Now, the servings used to be a cup, but to get under 10 grams of sugar, they reduced the serving size to 3/4 of a cup. Now, if you're thinking of your Honey Nut Cheerios versus regular Cheerios, you can see here that we have about 12-1 sugar in the Honey Nut Cheerios versus Cheerios. Okay. All right, well, we did get about 25% of the room getting it correct, which was substantially better than your probability of 20% since there was 5 choices. Okay. So before we start the panel, I thought I ought to talk a little bit about Faster Cures just for a moment and what was the idea at the beginning. And it was really an idea of an organization dedicated to shortening the time to find cures and better treatments for all life-threatening diseases. And as Margaret Anderson drilled into me for more than a decade, okay, time equals lives. And part of our effort at the very beginning was to try to create and strengthen the disease-specific organization. And many of you know there's a lot of organizations that have been around a long time, but we felt as a group that best practices and strengthening the disease-specific organization would accrue more patients to clinical trials, would create a better bond with the people that were focused on that particular disease, and would be able to raise money with the credibility that was created. And numerous organizations, many of whom are represented today and in our opening session, were kind of the founding members of this TRAIN program. And it was really to create best practices so you didn't have to reinvent the wheel, and you saw what happened and what didn't happen. And in visiting this morning with one of the panelists who work for Intel, Andy Grove, who was on our board at one of our medical foundations, at 48 consecutive board meetings, introduced a resolution that he wanted to out the American Cancer Society. At that time, they was only spending a couple % of the money they raised on research, and he was voted down 48 consecutive times at that time, since we didn't think that was our purpose. The idea from our first CEO, Greg Simon, was this concept of a train. So in theory, a train today could go 300 miles an hour. And so this was the concept that science was moving quickly, but it was operating on tracks, i.e. in infrastructure, policies that were still in the 19th century. And so as we looked at this train, we essentially said science is propelling forward with today, but we're operating on 19th or 20th century tracks. And it's really interesting when you think about it, when we proposed this, And we got this data. It's now about 7 years ago, if we go back to that previous slide, Larry. The idea that the average train in the United States travels at the exact same speed it did 100 years ago. And it was the tracks that really were forcing it to happen, not the ability of how fast a train can move. After a number of areas, I just wanted to highlight a couple for you. 2011, we had what was our how to innovate innovation in medical research. And this was our little group that's on the shores in Lake Tahoe, where we brought people together. You can see Francis Collins there kind of in the middle, and Chris Wiebacher at that time, who was the CEO of Sanofi, among many others, David Koch, and many others who had caused innovation, and many of the world's leading philanthropists came there. That was 2011. Then shortly after that, NCATS was passed, the National Center for Advancing Translational Science. And it was a different strategy. Some of you might have joined us at the march in 1998 when we brought 500,000 people around the country to really culminate the work of thousands of individuals to double the NIH, triple the NCI, substantially increase FDA, CDC, and others. Here was a very difficult period, and it still is in America. When you want to talk to Americans about health care, there are only 330 million different opinions about what we should be doing. So our strategy to really focus on this was to underline innovation and work with very few people. And eventually NCATS was formed to speed from basic science into clinical work, our translational effort. And my guess today, less than 1% and maybe less than 0.1% of all Americans even know NCATS exist. And in 2012, we reinforced this when Faster Cures put on the Celebration of Science in Washington, D.C., and our goal here, instead of 500,000 people, was to focus on 1,000 people that could make the difference in funding science and driving science at that time. And we were particularly focused on Harry Reid, who was the majority leader in the Senate, and Eric Cantor, who was the majority leader in the House, getting legislation through that would be favorable to medical research. And the NIH opened up to about 1,000 of us for the very first time on the campus, and we culminated this effort at the Kennedy Center with underlying the challenges in science. Next slide, Larry, if you would. So probably a lot of our focus in the last year or two was really focused on 21st Century Cures Act, and we gave our name, at least our second name, Cures, to Fred Upton and Diane DeGette to carry forth this change in 21st Century Cures, and the culmination of support by both Democrats and Republicans and the administration, similar to what occurred in the approval of NCATS. So it's been a long opportunity to try to change the world, and I think you can see from this morning, and you'll see a little later today, the enormous challenge in front of us to make sure the infrastructure we have, the data collection methods we use, are the same as that science could use today. And so not getting bogged down by laws, regulation, procedures on how we did something 100 years ago, and making sure that we can move forward as fast as science can take us. I should comment in listening to the opening panel this morning that in 1995, we sent out a questionnaire to tens of thousands of cancer patients. Would you make your data available if you thought it could help you, your family, or someone else? Over 75% of the people responded yes. And we then spent 2 years trying to figure out how you can waive HIPAA. We still haven't figured that out, but we're hard at work. But I think we underestimate what people are willing to do on making their data available today, whether it's clinical data, whether it's biological data, if they think it will help them, their family, or someone else. And with that, thank you for joining us.